Okay, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalam, wassalamu rasulullah. Welcome to our panel discussion today where we're rekindling the divine connection, deepening our relationship with Allah before Ramadan. Perfect timing, about 1 week and a bit to go, inshallah. So I have two amazing sisters, graduates of our certification program, Sister Mariam, who's based in Malaysia, and Raisa, who is based in the USA. Mariam's speciality is the Quran, and so she does a lot to relating to the Quran with us at Back to the Fitra, and is probably going to share along those lines with us today. And Raisa's expertise is helping women at that crucial time in life where they've decided divorce is the only option and to explore whether there might be another way. And so her contribution today, inshallah, is going to be around relationships and how that plays a role. So let's begin, inshallah. Bismillah. Welcome, sisters. So let's start with the Quran, Mariam, because really Ramadan is the month of the Quran, isn't it? And I think during the year we get busy, the Quran gathers dust on the shelf, and then we brush it off and we spend a bit of time with it, and then we get busy again. So I'd love for you to share with us a little bit around how we can really connect deeply with the Quran and have a good relationship with the Quran this Ramadan, inshallah.
All right, Alhamdulillah. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So, Alhamdulillah, I love the topic that you've chosen for this week's panel discussion. It shows that the divine connection, it's something that's already there, right? SubhanAllah. So we don't have to build it from scratch. We just have to strengthen what we already have. So, it's something that as we get older, we need to put in the effort only to strengthen it. How can we do that? How can we do that? How can we learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now, in order to get the most benefit from Ramadan, we don't just focus on what do we need to do, why do we abstain from food, all of those things, right? We need to understand why we're doing it. And part of it was to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our connection with the Quran is something that helps us to really know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, if we talk about getting to know someone in this life, like if I get to know you, Catherine, it's easy to do that by seeing you, having conversations with you, and all those sorts of things. The more we connect like this, the more we get to know each other, and the more we respect each other. It goes on like that, right? But subhanAllah, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't really see him, do we? And we don't have conversations like this. So how then can we have that connection? Even though we do not see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has given us the words, the book of Allah, the Quran. It's literally the words spoken by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what better way to learn more about Allah than through his own words? When we do not see him, it's the best source to learn about him is through him, the Quran, right? So Alhamdulillah for being able to have the manual of life, right? Like I'd like to think of it like that. It's like when we get something new, we always have a manual for it. And our manual for life is the Quran. In it, Allah talks about himself, that he's the most merciful, he is the all-knowing, he is the most loving, so many things that so many names and attributes of himself through which we get to know him. And the more we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more we love him. And the more we love him, the more we want to do what Allah has told us to do and abstain from what he has told us to stay away from. So the Quran is what helps us to attain all these things. So how can we deepen this relationship with the Quran itself? As you said, Ramadan is the month of the Quran, and alhamdulillah, I think all of us, we put in effort during each Ramadan to recite more of it, maybe understand a bit more of it, listen more. But usually what I see is that we tend to recite a lot and a lot and a lot. We try to finish one khatma, maybe two. And that's a really, really great thing because we know that so many benefits of reciting the Quran. There's so many blessings that we get because of it. But we should also remember that in the verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Ramadan is the month of the Quran, Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed, he also mentions to us the real reason of it. The real reason for revealing the Quran is as a form of remembrance, as a criterion between good and bad. So just by reciting alone will not be enough, right? We need to go a step further and understand the Quran so that we can ponder upon it. Like when we're doing our daily tasks, maybe we see that it's raining outside, and then it should remind us about the Quran. And the Quran should remind us about what's happening outside. It's like a dual connection. Quran is always a part of us. But in order for that to happen, we need that understanding. So that's the part where we need to see, okay, what are the steps that we can take so that we can get closer to understanding the words of Allah? There are a few tips, I could say, to understand the Quran. As myself, I am not a native Arab speaker, so it has not been as easy for me because of that fact. But it's not impossible, right? So we can always start with, it always takes that first step, subhanahu wa ta'ala, subhanallah, and Allah will help us when we have the correct intention. So we can either start to learn a bit of Arabic. We have so many options these days, alhamdulillah. There's word-to-word meanings. Maybe we can do 3 words, 5 words a day, so that when we learn the words and when we are reciting, we know, now this topic, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about this topic right here. So we kind of build a connection. We get to learn, we get to know the Quran directly while reciting it. And another one is the tafsir, and this is the most important one, right? The tafsir, so that we can really understand the context of the Quran. So learning Arabic is one way, and getting to know the word-to-word meanings of the Quran, and listening or reading tafsirs. These are ways that we can increase our understanding of the Quran. And we don't wait until Ramadan begins to do these things, right? In preparation for Ramadan, we can like take a moment and see where are we with the Quran right now. Right now, do we spend a bit of our time with it every day? If yes, that's amazing, mashallah. Even if it's like 5 minutes, it's consistency that we really want, right? So if the answer is yes already to that, then we can try on increasing it a little bit, because we don't want Ramadan to be the same as every other day, right? So in order to prepare for Ramadan, let's increase the time that we're spending with the Quran. We can recite a bit more or do a bit more of the things to understand it. like the learning Arabic, reading the word to word, or listening to tafsirs. Or we can also listen to the Quran while doing our daily tasks. So in this way, we are engaging with the Quran a bit more during these days, so that when we enter Ramadan, we can take it still a step further, inshallah, so that we can really immerse ourselves in the Quran during the month of the Quran. And
Inshallah.
inshallah, reap the benefits of it by getting the blessings, by getting to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also by being the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the special people, the people of the Quran.
That was beautiful, Mariam. Jazakallah khair. And really to bring it back to the way we look at things, back to the fitras, that we're always experiencing life through the way we think about it. So seeing the Quran as the words of Allah and that opportunity to get to know Allah more, that's a beautiful shift in perspective. Then, oh, I should do it because I get the reward. But doing it because I want to know Allah, I want to feel that love of Allah, that's a lot more motivating, subhanAllah. And of course, we need that motivation to take it to the next level, because what you were saying is it's not about going wide, it's about going deep. So it's about quality rather than quantity. It's not about how many words can we recite in the month of Ramadan, but how many words do we actually understand? Because we're not going to get to know Allah just by reciting. We're going to get to know Allah by really reflecting on His words. And I liked the way you shared that, when we get to know each other as people, it's through conversation. Well, the Quran is almost like a conversation, because throughout it, Allah's asking us questions. And although, we're not actually having a dialogue, Allah's aware of everything about us. So He knows if we're reflecting on that question and responding to that question and shifting things in our life to meet what was behind that question. Because why would He ask us a question unless He wanted us to contemplate something? So,
Exactly.
Jazakallah khair. I hope everybody, took a beautiful feeling from what Mariam shared. And I especially love going into Ramadan, or even before Ramadan, with the intention of, I want to know Allah better this Ramadan. And I'm going to find Allah better through understanding the Quran, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, sis. So we've covered we're really focusing on body, mind, and soul here. And so Mariam's covered the soul aspect. Now we're going to go to the mind, or the emotional side of things, with Raisa, because we just talked about our relationship with Allah. But our relationship with others, even our relationship with ourselves, can potentially be a barrier to feeling that beautiful spiritual connection. And I'd love you to share a little bit more about that, Raisa.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. SubhanAllah, being in a relationship, whether it's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with yourself, or even with others, requires presence, requires being present in the moment. And that's a state of mind. So like, where are we? And a lot of times, in our day-to-day hustle and bustle of life, we're scattered all over the place. We're like, oh, I have to do this. I have to go here. I have to do that, or we're processing while we're on the go. We're like, oh, this happened. What does that mean? And we're oscillating between the past and the future. And we're not really there in the present moment. And not only is that the place where we can connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the present moment, it's also the place where we can connect with ourselves and others. And when we're in relationships with people, sometimes, depending on the relationship, it can bring up emotions that can cover up our intention. And our intention really is to be connected to ourselves, you know, to have good relationships with others, starting with the relationship we have with Allah and ourselves. But when we get caught up in our feelings or our emotions, it can really take us away from connection, whether it's with Allah, ourselves, and others. And I think it's really important to be in that state of presence. And so some of the things that we can do to be in that state of presence is to slow down, is to pause, so we can reflect. That's one of the things you were talking about, because Allah asks us a lot of times to reflect, to contemplate. But if we're running and, you know, just on autopilot and we're not in that state of presence, or even in the present moment, we're not going to be able to reflect on those things. And a lot of times, you know, feelings that come up, like say in relationships, you know, they can be challenging, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that we are tested for one another. And so a lot of times what happens is that in those relationships, the feelings that come up in your, especially your intimate relationships with your family members, with your spouse, with your children, things that come up, those challenges that come up in those relationships can cause us to be in our feelings and overwhelming us. And then we lose that connection. We lose that connection to ourselves. We lose that connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we get consumed with becoming worried about, you know, who said what does it mean? You know, fears come up, anxieties come up. Is somebody upset with me? Am I doing the right thing? You know, and it's easy to get swept away in our emotions, and that actually prevents us from connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, connecting to the Quran, because feelings, being in our feelings and that overwhelm disconnects us. So I think really just understanding the emotional aspect of it is a couple of things. One is being present in the moment, to be able to connect to yourself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and dealing with challenges in relationships that bring up emotions, whether it's anger or resentment or frustration, you know, all those things. How do you help yourself to get back to that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because that's where you're going to find the solution for your test. The test comes from Allah, but also the answers and the solution come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if we're stuck in our head with racing thoughts, you know, and big feelings, we won't be able to hear the guidance that He's sending us in order to succeed, to respond to that test in a successful way, in a way that's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So really it's about like slowing down and reconnecting back to yourself in the present moment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and knowing that He is guiding you and He is always showing you what you need to see when you are connected to yourself. But in the disconnection, you won't be able to see it or hear it. And I think that's the biggest part, is where are we turning to when we have the emotional overwhelm, the emotional state that takes us away from our intentions and our presence. And, you know, we end up just believing the thoughts in our mind, or we believe the feelings of fear or overwhelm. It's an opportunity to really just come back home to the present state, to the present moment. And that's the opportunity that we have to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the solutions that we're looking for. A lot of times we think and believe that it's going to come from outside of us, but it's not. It comes from our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a lot of times it's just slowing down, pausing, reconnecting, and knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always guiding us to the answers and the solutions that we're looking for, and that peace, you know, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that verily in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. And it's not only just dhikr that connects us to remembrance, that gives us peace. It's consciousness. consciousness of remembering Allah. Like, you know, are we thinking of him and remembering him moment by moment in our daily life, and how we're responding and how we're, you know, showing up? And that consciousness only comes from that being connected to yourself in the present moment. So inshallah, you know, that was helpful in terms of just coming back home to yourself in the present moment, to connect to yourself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to find that peace that you're looking for, to find the solutions that you're looking for your, not just for your spiritual state, but for your emotional state.
SubhanAllah. And one of the interesting things I was hearing was the solution to your relationship problems comes from Allah, but your relationships problems are a barrier to you connecting with Allah and hearing the answers. And so it really comes down to what one of our clients has nicknamed the power of the pause, that all feelings, you know, settle when our thinking shifts to something else. And once that happens, then we start seeing a bit more clarity in what direction to go. But having that awareness is so important, isn't it? That if we get preoccupied in the disagreement we've just had with somebody, understanding that that time that we are after the disagreement that we're spending on replaying it over and over again in our head and getting upset about it is stealing away our potential rewards of Ramadan, because we're disconnecting from Allah, we're disconnecting from doing things for the sake of Allah, we're getting all churned up. So as you said, it's being conscious and aware of what you're actually doing in your own head. And is it to your detriment or is it to your benefit? Alhamdulillah. Which comes to the final part, which is our body. And the reason I chose that for myself is not because I'm an expert in it, but because it is a very key focus of mine, because I'm very good at neglecting myself. And I've become very aware of how that is also detrimental to my relationship with Allah. And being so, if you get unwell, then obviously it's really hard, you know, to do your acts of worship. And again, if you've got physical misery, not emotional misery, but physical misery, then that also distracts you, you know, from Allah, because you're focused on, oh, this hurts, or I can't breathe, or got a headache, whatever the situation is. And so there's a verse in the Quran where it says, eat everything of which is halal and tayyib. And talking about getting the deeper meaning of words in the Quran, one day when I was reading that, it just like hit me over the head like a hammer. It's like, it's not just eat what is halal. It says, and tayyib. And that then became a mission of mine to work towards eating what is tayyib, what is good for me. So for instance, this is going to be different for everybody, but according to, you know, the specialists that I've, you know, been seeing over the years, gluten and dairy and sugar's bad for everybody, but those particularly create inflammation in my body, and inflammation, of course, is the source of pretty much every disease. And so if I want to eat tayyib, I need to actually avoid those things. Not because I want to lose weight, not because of any other reason other than it's not tayyib for me. Like it might be tayyib for somebody else, but it's not tayyib for me to eat those things. So knowing ourselves and what is good for us and not good for us to eat, making sure that we're hydrated, making sure that we're getting enough sleep. Now, sleep, I've also realized, because I've actually lived off a sleep deficit most of my life, that you get to an age where you can't do that anymore because your body starts to fail you. And so looking at things from a perspective of, well, how can I prioritize sleep? It's very hard when sometimes I have meetings at 5:30 in the morning and then I finish meetings at 10 o'clock at night. And then at the moment it's summertime, so we don't finish praying till after 10. And then we were having to be up around 4, to pray again. And there's not that much time to actually get sleep. So how do you do it? And one of the things that I came to think about, it's not obviously not something new, but it was new to me to think about it this way, and it's all about how we think about it, was our day actually starts at Maghrib. And by thinking about it from that perspective, actually helps you put sleep properly in the picture, because you're starting your new day at Maghrib. So well, so for me, for instance, if I've stuffed up the day, it's always like, oh, well, now I have to start again tomorrow, right? And tomorrow was always when I woke up. But then there's a whole lot more time to keep making a mess of things that would then mess up my start in the next morning. Like if I felt like I messed up, then I would probably doom scroll and do all sorts of things that delayed me sleeping because I was feeling not good, and so I'm trying to escape that not good feeling, and then I've actually made it harder to really have a really good next day because I've spoiled it in my attitude from the day before. Now if my day starts at Maghrib, completely different story, isn't it? It's like, okay, what is happened has happened. I get to reboot at Maghrib time, which means I don't wreck that night's sleep, which means I can wake up productive and active and fresh the next day. How profound is that? Just a simple shift in actually coming back to what is our Islamic teaching, that the day does start at Maghrib, right? How much difference that makes to the whole way things unfold. So understanding that this body is a trust that Allah has given us, that it only has the capacity to take so much. And if we don't look after it, it's going to fail us. And there's going to be nothing worse than have an active mind and a failing body. Can you imagine that? Having a mind that still wants to do stuff and still has great ideas and passions to do things, but the body won't do it anymore. So one of my focuses this Ramadan, in a realistic way, is to look at how I can make looking after this body an act of worship, so that I can also feel closer to Allah. Because all of these things, whether you've got aches or pains, or whether you're too tired, whether you've eaten too much and you feel sluggish, all of these things become a barrier to doing our worship for Allah, to doing those extra prayers, to getting up for tahajjud, all of these things. We just feel lazy if we're tired. We feel lazy if we're full. We feel lazy if we're not nourished properly, if we've had too much sugar and we've gone for a spike and then we collapse. So body, mind, and soul, it's really important how you think about it if you want to get closer to Allah and rekindle that divine connection. So I want to wrap the session up with, I think, each of us giving one thing that we would like people to take away from the session today. Mariam, what's one thing you would like them to take away from your part of the session?
It's the conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Although it doesn't happen like we are doing the conversation, we can always turn to the Quran to see what Allah wants to tell us. And if we want to talk to Allah, the door of dua is always open. So dua and Quran.
Beautiful. Alhamdulillah. So have a conversation with Allah. So Raisa, what's one thing you would like them to take away from your part today?
My part, I would say, is that you always have an opportunity to slow down, to pause, to reground yourself, to reconnect back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it feels like everything is really overwhelming and you have too much on your plate, too much to carry, and stressed out and just running, which a lot of times there's a lot of things to take care of in Ramadan. And sometimes things can get tense in the home as well, and in relationships. So finding that time to connect, to give yourself that time of quiet, of peace, of reconnecting, of grounding. And there's always an opportunity to pause and reconnect back to yourself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Beautiful. And I think what I would like everyone to leave with is start your day at iftar, not at sahur, because we tend to start our day at sahur. Now, that doesn't mean I'm suggesting that you flip day and night and that you stay up all night and sleep all day. That is not what I'm saying at all, right? I'm just saying let's go back to our Islamic teachings and start our day at iftar time, at maghrib time, inshallah, and then see how we can look after ourselves for the sake of Allah. Because no one else is going to. There's no knight in shining armor going to come along and go, I'm going to take care of you. I wish, but it doesn't work that way, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, Mariam and Raisa, for your wisdom. And Jazakallah khair, everyone, for joining us today. I hope that you found it beneficial. I will post the link to the recording, and if you could share your thoughts and takeaways after you've reflected on them on the recording post, that would be amazing, inshallah. On that note, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each and every one of you this Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let us all reach and fulfill this Ramadan, because, it's not here yet. And I hope, inshallah, that you've taken something valuable from today. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.